Hey there, this is Enzo speaking. Today I'm going to talk about product analytics and Epiphany. Why Epiphany? I'd love you folks to realize during this discussion, presentation, how accessible product analytics is, even if you're an early stage person, early stage company, or even if you're later stage like the most advanced things. I'd love to share how they can be made really, really quickly. And this is going to be the topic of today, how you actually can kind of ramp up these skills as fast as possible. So the talk is going to be very actionable, very action driven with a lot of very concrete examples. And hopefully by the end of this discussion, you will be able to, go with this actionable insight and turn them into great analysis for your own features or products. So the first question is, how should you instrument your data? How should you monitor the user's behavior inside your product? I found this question to be quite hard to answer just because there is so much data and noise in the industry. Something that you hear a lot is something called analysis paralysis, which is just people don't know where to get started and how to cut through this noise. It's actually something that Brian Balfour explained really well. He said that people were just spending so much time on analyzing what tool they could use that they were barely using this data and leveraging it, which is what we're going to try to fight today altogether. The main problems we often see when we advise companies and help them out is that they start with this very, very long journey of tracking things out and then trying to move forward and analyzing things data out. So the problem is really that companies waste hours implementing events. They end up with a black box, which are really hard to, it's really hard to know what is where. The documentation and, being able to describe what is where is time consuming. It's rarely up to date. And then these tracking, they turn into dozens of dashboards in the best situations, but that get barely looked at. So we're going to try to change that and try to give you a few tips to have a better approach to data analysis than, over engineering things, basically. This is a bit about my background. I work for a startup, a scale up, and then a B2B SaaS company in Dublin. I'm currently working on June.so, which is an instant product analytics that comes from my frustration working on data in top product teams all around Europe. So I'll talk a bit about June later, but June is basically an instant product analytics, which allows every startup to track their metrics the same ways the Airbnbs and Facebook and Slack do within seconds without even having expertise needed. If you want to check out, the website is June.so. Okay, cool. So now let's cut through the noise and follow some simple steps to, have an epiphany with the analytics. We're going to first look at the first phase one, which is how do you get started? Then we'll go to phase two, how do you mature your analytics stack and learn more things, deeper things, and then phase three, which is the mastering stage. Phase one is all about getting started. We'll cut this section into two parts, the process and the metrics, and we'll do the same for every single section, actually, all of the three sections I just mentioned to you. Okay, so section one, getting starting with the right processes. The first process is to track your data. Tracking is the easiest way to collect data. It looks something like that if you've never seen it. This is a tracking event from Segment, which is a customer data platform. It looks by basically implementing a line of code inside your code base so that whenever a customer does something or a reaction happens based on what a customer did, it's being triggered, it's being tracked. If you have questions about how this works in general, I did another presentation a few months ago, and you can check the slides deck for this presentation at bit.ly/product analytics basics. For today, I will assume that you understand what is a tracking event and just move forward with that. Okay, so tracking, another point which is quite interesting before we get started is that there are lots of great ways today to avoid being vendor locked in when it comes to tracking. So if you're thinking about implementing the SDKs of one of your favorite visualization tool out there, it's probably a good idea, but it will probably, it will lock you in. It will prevent you from trying other visualization tool. So something that we see more and more is people going toward customer data platforms, also called CDPs, such as Segment and mParticle, which allows you to track a tracking event once and distribute it to as many resources, destination as you want, without having to do any engineering work. It's just basically adding a destination, just a couple of clicks. The thing which is very important to understand in terms of process is the mental model you should adopt around product analytics. I'm going to go through 3 stages. First, why you should start lean. Second, why you should start with a goal. And third, share with you some best practices out there in the market. So about starting lean. Starting lean means that you need to avoid heavy lifting with data project. So a typical journey with analytics looks something like that. You set up some success metrics, then you track your users' behaviors, which is called instrumentation. And third, you can visualize your data. Usually people will define a lot of success metrics and then instrument a lot of things in the product and then analyze a lot of things. And it will take ages to move this progress forward. You want to typically avoid that. A great approach looks something like that. You take one project, a tiny project, and you try to go all throughout the journey of analytics with that single project. So let's say you have a new feature you want to release. You can define a success metric for it, instrument 2 or 3 behaviors related to these features, and then tweak around your favorite analysis visualization tool to land the analysis result that you're seeking for. So the second thing is start with goals. So a goal is typically a high-level achievement that you want to drive. It usually looks something like that. You want more customers or you want them to spend more. You can break these goals into sub-goals, and these sub-goals are typically the starting point of the project I just mentioned in the previous slide. So for instance, if you want more users, you probably want more users to find your product. So you probably want some more, engagement with your product, whatever are the first touch point of your product. So this is how you can think about getting started with goals, just being very pragmatic and break things down. The third thing is look for best practices. A lot of people have been thinking about this space for a lot of years, which means that you can save tons of time if you look around. My advice here would be to seek on the internet, speak with people around you, like head of product people, PMs from other industries, CEOs, whatever, from other companies you benchmark or product Twitter is going to be great. Lots of very influential people there showing lots of tips like Lenny. And the VC blogs are great. Anderson Horowitz is one of them. Just so many resources out there. You can also look into June.so/templates. We highlight the templates which are available on the platform, and you can really get started within the 2 clicks if you're looking for best practices out there. The third thing when it comes to processes and getting started is making sure that the data analytics mindset goes into your team mindset. This is what I call integrate the analytics into your company and making sure that it matches your culture. Why matching your culture? There are just so many ways that your companies work. And the only successful way for your company to be more data-driven or your team to be more data-driven is to make sure that it fits the culture of your company. So you could try to fit the data mindset into your day-to-day, for instance, with internal communication channels like Slack. You could also use your emails or a TV screen to make sure that every time you run an analysis, it's visible. Slack could be a Slack notification. We're going to see a few ways to do that. Emails could be making sure that you notify whenever you have an update on one of your core, analysis. And TV screen is simply, opening your session, putting it in the monitor in the office space, and that's it. Milestones means you want to get some updates, frequent updates about how things are moving, and also having some clear goals about where you want to go and making sure that you update them on a regular basis, whatever communication channels you have internally, being asynchronous or synchronous ones. Top tools I have in mind for sharing that with your teams. Whatever tracking solutions you use, they probably have an integration with your communication channels. For instance, Segment can integrate with Slack, and for single tracking events, you'll be able to be notified when it's triggered or when there is like problem of quality around this event, these kind of things. If you want to receive notification for computed data, let's say you want not only to receive when someone sign up, but actually the conversion rate or something like that, then June is great. June is doing that. And for all the rest, I will go for an agnostic solution like Zapier or Tray. There are a lot of them which are going to help you connect any tools with basically your favorite communication channels. So this is the stack you could be looking at already. So now that we've seen the processes to get started, let's look into a couple of metrics which are relevant for early stage companies or for your product team. I'm going to start with 3. The signups are really interesting. Wherever you are, you probably want to fuel your growth with new signups. The only tracking events you need to understand your signups is a signup tracking event. So whenever someone finishes a signup, there should be an event which is triggered. Ideally, this event should be triggered by the backend, so it's more accurate. So like the ad blockers or the new web browsers that block the events don't block your signup event. And a nice way to visualize that is simply a line curve where you say to the tool that you have to count the number of unique signups on a daily basis. The active users is also extremely important. It's really the key to reach your product market fit. A nice way to track that is basically to track when users are active, which means when they're getting value from your product, the unique value they're getting from your product. This is usually a chain of like 3 to 10 actions they can take in your product that really make them really sticky. So this is not about just logging in or opening your settings. It's actually more engaging actions. You could then visualize that within with the classic visualization around daily active users, weekly active users, monthly active users. There are lots of tools that do that out of the box, and I would advise to go that direction in the early days at least. The feature activation is actually the most granular way you can get started, which is to understand whether or not people are engaged with the specific features. For that, I would just track the first steps of a feature being used and use some kind of basic funnel to understand, from the home, from the start of your experience, how many of the people are actually engaging at least once with one of your specific, events. You could do that analysis and then run it at a per user level. So you don't have the overall count, but really at a user level, how many people converted, and which means that they have activated on this feature. Cool. So another cool thing is feature retention and retention curve. This is basically how long people stay around on your product. You could do that with the events we just mentioned. It's basically being covered already. You just need that to put that in a basic line curve analysis and understand how often people are sticking to these features or product over time. Again, you can do that with a couple of clicks with pretty much all the product analytics out there. Acquisition cohort is also a great way to understand when, based on when people got started, whether or not they're sticking on your product. So again, the cohort tables is something you can find all around the internet. It's very convenient to understand if you're about to get your product market fit, and also analyze and find out from which date people are most or less active to talk to them to understand why they're less or more active. A question that often people have when they get started is, should they focus on acquisition or retention? This is actually a false choice. It's almost impossible to grow your retention if your acquisition, if your retention is bad, and vice versa. So you should care about both at the same time. All you need to start optimizing your retention is a base of users. So a couple of dozens users is already enough to look at your retention. So it doesn't matter how small you are. Same goes if you're like a giant company that has tons of features and you're releasing something very specific. You probably want to understand whether or not people are engaging with that specific things. Okay, so now that you got the basics, let's move to phase 2, the maturing. How do you get further than this basics analysis of your businesses? So again, we're going to split this stage into 2. First, the processes you can adopt, and second, the metrics that you may want to look at, which are pretty common across the industries. First, the processes. So there are 2 more things I didn't mention about tracking events. One is the properties, the other one is the traits. So the properties are basically metadata that you can add to your tracking events to enrich the activity or enrich the event and the actions and try to attach more information to it. For instance, you could add the platform. You could say someone clicked on my sign up button, but that person came from desktop, or that person came from mobile. Another way to look at that is also the source. For instance, someone clicked on my sign up button, but they came from Facebook and AdWords paid channel versus they came from earned channel like blogs. Once you have attached this information to your tracking events, you can also pool this information in your favorite visualization tool, which means that you're going to be able to do some cohort analysis based not only on the behavior, which is click the sign up, but also a subdivision of who did this action, aka the property. Trait is also a meta information that you can attach, but this time you don't attach it to the action itself, the tracking event, but you attach it to the people who triggers this event. In this case, it means that no matter what the people have done, if they own the trait, like gender equal male, age equal 30, then they will be part of your visualization. This is a similar concept simply for users, and it's going to be useful for different situations. Okay, so what can you do with that? What can you do to go further and mature your product analytics? I've listed a few of them here. The first one is the feature edit. Feature edit is a great way to take a step back and understand at a macro level why are people engaging with your product. To do that, you only need to track one event for each single of your features. And then you can use a scatter plot to visualize that in the space. Revenue, you can add the revenue data, the revenue amount, to the event tracking, which is triggered when people purchase your product, for instance, planned purchase, and you can add that as a property. So let's say people sign up, and during the sign up, you ask for the credit card and the specific price. You may pass this price as a property of the event. Let's say price equal $50, 50 euros. You can also decide that to attach the price to a user trait. So instead of saying the sign up event as a property, which is a price 50 euros, you could just say the users, let's say Enzo, as a specific price, and that price is 50 euros, or as a specific plan, and that plan is premium. And for all the customers that are premium, you know that they pay 50 euros. Again, a nice way to visualize that would be a line chart in your favorite visualization tool. Funnels are more for are kind of like advanced optimization. Once your product starts to grow, there will be a lot of funnels, a lot of workflows inside your product. The most common ones are the signups, the onboarding after people sign up and before people get the value from your product and activate. The free to paid, if you have a free version of your product or even a free trial, are they to try to understand if people are converting from free to paid, or the virality, are people sharing around your product? For all of that, you may just have tracking events for each of the steps and then visualize them very easily in a funnel, again with the unique count. Okay, cool. So now that you've optimized for this short-term getting started approach, and then you started to mature on the metrics that I mentioned, the last step is the mastering. How do you get further? How do you make these very advanced analyses that are very specific to your business and maybe a little bit more one-off? Okay, so here are a few processes to get there. The first process is to basically try to incentivize the process around analytics to hard metrics. You want to assign some metrics to the teams, and you want to reward them when they hit them. You want also the teams to get some ownership and have very visible metrics out there in the real world. You also want to make sure that people change the definition of done. Whenever you get started, a team gets started with a feature and build something new, they shouldn't call the epic or the story or whatever done before the metrics are being computed. So you just want to make sure that people adopt this very, very strong mindset around your data. Third, you want to share that more data is not better data. So you don't need to track 50 things to actually work out your analysis. You probably need 1, 2, 3, 5 tracking events max per new releases, and make sure that you know how you will turn these tracking events into visualizations. So that's very important. You can also use the properties that I mentioned so that you have less number of tracking events, but that you actually put all the richness of your screens within the properties, so you can bake the complexity into subsection of the event. When you start to grow, data quality will also become a thing. If you get to to 20, 30, 50, 100 tracking events, it's going to become a thing to make sure that when you release new portion of your product, you don't bring things out, or as people join or leave your teams or your companies, they always get the context they need. This is usually where a tagging plan comes into account. Most of the case, it's a Google Sheet or whatever wiki tool you use, like Notion, Coda. You can just fill the list with a list of the name of the tracking events that you've created and the description to what they occur. I also suggest to add a screenshot so that you always remember visually where each event is being triggered. Okay, so a couple of more visualization in bonus. We have actually 3 things that come very, very frequently for the most advanced teams. First is the concept of activation. Activation or product activation are the steps that the customers needs to take to become active in your product, meaning that they have a higher chance to retain over time. In this case, the best way to visualize it is to find the threshold for which your customers are more retained. So this is retention curves, and as you can see, they are kind of flattening. Here, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to understand what is the amount of time the user needs to do something so that the retention flattens. In that case, it's when a not created happens more than 20 times. So you need to find really the balance on where people are getting to and what people need to do to actually do these activations. Power users is a very, very nice way to understand who are the most engaged customers in your product. So if you have measured the activation tracking events, as I said in the previous part, you can actually just reuse them to understand what are the number of days that customers came back to do the things. And ideally, you would get a segment of customers, whether or not they're using your product 1 time a week, 2 times a week, 3 times a week. And you should have a nice, nice chart that starts to smile so that you can identify a very highly engaged set of customers for your product. If that's the case, then I suggest talking to these customers to understand what they're doing with your product and why they love it so much, and trying to replicate that to the other customers which are least engaged. Fake doors also is more advanced. You could, before you build something new in your product, you could actually test it with a fake door, a fat button that says, hey, feature X is upcoming, and you can just monitor how many people, click on this button and kind of like validate the assumption that you have that people are getting excited with that before you even start building it. Again, a basic visualization graph is pretty enough to understand out of the people that see the button or see the new features, how many did engage with it within a specific time frame, obviously, etc., etc. There are just a lot more of them out there, but I think this is a very nice set of metrics to get started. These are examples of activation metrics. What are the actions that people need to take to become active? Twitter figure out that it's the number of views in the feed that matters. If you've seen the feed of Twitter more than 20 times within, let's say, a week, you are much more likely to stick around. Same with Slack. If you hit 2,000 messages in your workspace, then you were much more likely to retain over time. Cool. Okay. So congrats. Thanks for sticking with me. You made it to learn a lot more about how to get started with your data, and hopefully you learned things today and actionable tips to kind of like move toward a better product thanks to data. This is the processes I recommended. Again, getting started with very out of the box and metrics which are really relevant, highly relevant for your business, with a few tracking events that I mentioned. Make sure you adopt this mental model of first having clear goals, then knowing how you want to measure it, and then only tracking things out. If you go the other way around, which is you track everything and then you try to visualize it, it's going to be basically a dead end for you. It's going to be extremely painful. Second, the maturing phase with properties and traits, and really enrich your data with a lot more advanced things. And phase 3, which is mastering your product at a high level and your customers at a high level. Try to understand how many days a week they come. Also trying to understand, what are the main things that people use in your product. Hopefully with this high level approach, you'll also be able to kind of come back to lower level analytics and make sure that you focus on the right things throughout the analytics journey. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for listening. Please drop me an email at Enzo@June.so if you have any questions or any challenges with your analytics, product analytics. I would be so happy to support you on this one. Again, we're building June, which is an instant product analytics. You can find it at June.so. Please let me know if you have any comments about it. We're building it for our customers. We'd love to hear your thoughts about it. Thanks again, and thanks for the product school, and have a lovely day all. Take care.